Welcome to the Nerdy Photographer Podcast. On this episode, we'll be rounding up the top photography stories of 2021. And without further delay, here is your host, Casey Fadgett.
Oh, thank you very much for that introduction, Fibonacci. Welcome to the Nerdy Photographer Podcast. I am the host, Casey Fadgett. And just like that, 2021 is almost over. Can you believe it? Man, time flies when there's a global pandemic and you have trouble keeping track of the days. In this episode, I'm rounding up some of the biggest stories in the world of photography this year and looking forward just a little bit to 2022. I reached out on social media to listeners and friends in the photography industry to find out what you all thought should be covered in this year in review, and I've got three big stories to discuss with you. So let's get started. First off, NFTs. As my friends over at the In the Frame podcast said, I'd have to say it's NFTs. I still don't understand it, but I think it's a big deal. NFTs blew up in 2021. Honestly, my Twitter feed is slammed every day and has been all year with photographers releasing new NFTs and spaces about NFTs. And there's clubhouse rooms full of discussions about NFTs. As for understanding them, you might still be wondering, what even are NFTs? NFT stands for non-fungible tokens. Think of them as sort of a visual cryptocurrency or encrypted digital art. You can't touch it, but you can own it. And some people are paying a lot of money for them, but more on that in just a little bit. You might be thinking, so why are people paying a bunch of money for a piece of digital art? Can't someone just make copies of it? Well, part of the beauty, if you will, of NFTs is that the encryption verifies whether or not you have the original work. Also, it helps the artist keep track of the digital movement of their work, and they can even get residuals or commissions each time the work changes hands or gets sold again, which is, that is a part that is very beneficial to art creators. That's the good thing for artists. And buyers can be assured that they're getting the original piece. And NFTs can come with some real world perks if the seller chooses to make them available. For example, I was listening to someone try to explain to Quentin Tarantino what the benefits of an NFT were, and they mentioned that he could create an NFT with the very famous image of Jules and Vincent pointing their guns in Pulp Fiction, which was so very, very popular, and I think still is among some circles, and sell it using the blockchain. Whoever owns the original NFT would be able to have dinner with Quentin once a year. It proves that they are the owner of the actual NFT. That sort of thing is a benefit that could come with an NFT. And to be clear, NFTs aren't just photos. They can be music, a written story, or an article, or even a meme. The original Disaster Girl meme photo sold for $500,000 earlier this year. $500,000, $500,000 for an original meme. Jack Dorsey, auctioned off his first tweet on Twitter as an NFT. People are spending a lot of money, which brings me to the NFT market. There are numerous markets for NFTs, and there are loads of groups willing to tell you how to get into the business of creating your own NFTs and quote unquote making money with NFTs. And I've noticed a few interesting things sitting in on some of these discussions. Many of the NFT markets, primarily they use a cryptocurrency called Ethereum for purchasing works and for paying the artists as well, which means you're getting paid can depend on how that cryptocurrency is valuated. And in short, you only know exactly what you're quote unquote getting paid when you decide to cash out. Otherwise, it's just, it still fluctuates. Also, the way many people, at least in the groups that I've sat in on, are promoting their NFT work on these markets has a very pyramid scheme feel to it. And maybe I'm wrong about this. If I am, please feel free to, contact me on social media, leave a comment, tell me more about it. But from what I have witnessed personally, these people get groups of artists to kind of buy in, like all contribute an amount of money. Say like you got 20 artists and they're all putting in, a few $100s. And then what they do is they all take turns having each person's artwork gets bought by like the total amount of money in the pool. They drive it up with bidding, like a bidding war, until it buys up like a X price. And they do this to inflate the price of the work so that collectors, and you can read that as people with money hoping to strike it big in the NFT market and invest in something that's going to grow in value, they'll see the price of that work going up rapidly and choose to buy the piece and as an investment. It's kind of sleazy, and the money just keeps going around and around and around. And they ask artists to keep creating new works and keep the cycle going. And I feel like somebody has to be profiting off of this. And my guess is the people running these groups. I mean, maybe I'm wrong, because they often mention bringing in your artist friends and the more the merrier, all while saying it's community of artists supporting one another. Then how is anyone actually making any money unless someone outside of that community is bringing, is spending money? I don't know. It's a little confusing, which brings me to my next point. It's going to be very difficult to make a lot of money creating NFTs if you don't already have a market for your work. The market is now totally saturated. People are using a lot of energy to make endless NFTs. And speaking of energy, that brings me to my final point on this particular topic. There's a lot being said right now about the environmental issues that arise from different sorts of cryptos, including NFTs and Ethereum. And there's an article in The Verge that said on this that individual pieces of crypto art are at least partially responsible for the millions of tons of planet heating carbon dioxide emissions generated by cryptocurrencies used to buy and sell them. While some artists referred to NFTs as quote unquote an ecological nightmare pyramid scheme. Something to think about before minting your next NFT, especially if you're a landscape photographer. You like the landscape? You might want the landscape to stick around. All right, next topic. Mirrorless Monsters. Camera companies showed off in 2021 that they are fully committed to mirrorless cameras as the wave of the future, with each of the big three rolling out their flagship mirrorless models, or at least a flagship placeholder in the case of Canon. Sony hit us with the Alpha A1, 50 megapixels, 30 frames per second shooting, 8K video. Nikon, the Z9, 45 megapixels, 20 frames per second RAW, 30 frames per second JPEG. Canon, the R3, which is not shipping yet. They kind of like let it out there for the Olympics for some people to use, but it also appears to be marketed more towards the photojournalism crowd, sports shooters, like the old 1DX models we didn't have the highest megapixel counts, and the R3 has, but it's more about fast shooting. And the R3 comes in with a 24 megapixel sensor and 30 frames per second raw shooting. Rumors point to another higher megapixel, probably close to 50, to challenge the Sony R1, because of course it's got to be the 1 series, being announced in 2022. So that's on the horizon. Speaking of 2022, what do you think we're going to be talking about next year? Friend of the podcast, Rob Hall, mentioned recently in one of his Instagram stories that camera companies seem to be looking to regain some market share from third-party vendors in the lighting industry by moving back to proprietary lighting systems. Now, why did he say that? He pointed to an announcement from Nikon that they will be partnering with lighting companies Nissan and Profoto. Nothing else is really mentioned beyond there being a partnership, though Profoto released a statement saying that the partnership would, quote unquote, further improve functionality for professional photographers. Which is kind of odd because both of those companies, Nissan and Profoto, already create products that work with Nikon cameras. So how are we going to improve functionality for professional photographers? Something is afoot. Add to that Canon has created a new quote unquote accessory shoe for the R3, which I'm sure will go over to the R1 as well and to any other new mirrorless models that come out. At first, the information on this was really limited, but now they're saying it will be completely backwards compatible, but it will have increased functionality with new Canon devices, such as microphones, so that you don't have to plug them into like via a cable into the camera, and that's a great thing. And also say that they're going to, it's all flash controllers, off camera flash controllers, and potentially on camera flash units will receive additional functionality through this accessory shoe. Things that they mentioned included powering your microphone or your flash controller through this accessory shoe from the camera battery instead of having to put batteries into it. Now, mirrorless cameras have notoriously bad battery life to begin with. I don't know if I want to be powering an additional device using my mirrorless camera battery as well. Now, when it comes to flash, the world of third party flash units has completely exploded in the last decade, but it may be too late for camera companies to keep up with companies like Godox who are out there, like, creating like lighting that can work with, various systems, but is also inexpensive. If they try to make their flash systems proprietary, I think they could face a lot of backlash from photographers who are already paying large sums of money for new mirrorless camera and lens systems as it is. Trying to grab some more money for, you can only use our flash as well. I don't know how that's going to work out. And that brings me to our biggest photography industry story of 2021. And I'm going to throw it over to Stephen Van Elk to intro the story.
Hey there, Nerdy Photographer podcast listeners. This is Steve Van Elk of the Wedding Photo Hangover. The biggest news story I saw this year in the photography world, or at least in the wedding photography world, was the story of the dog groomer turned wedding photographer turned hero. That's right, hero, not villain, as many would suspect when you leave a wedding and delete all the photos on your way out the door.
And Stephen was not alone in thinking that this was the top story of 2021.
So I feel like the story I heard most about, in not through just photographer groups, but also non-photographer groups, was the lady who, and she wasn't actually a photographer, but who shot the wedding, and for a friend, I guess she was doing a favor, and then I guess they were being dicks to her and not appreciating her. And then she deleted all the photos right in front of the groom and just walked away.
That was Melissa Johnstone from the Filters Removed podcast. And this was by far the overwhelming choice for top story of the year. This story, I saw this story getting shared by so many people in my friends groups, people sending it to me. There were articles in foreign news outlets on this story. It really captured a lot of attention. And we're going to go back to Stephen Van Elk for a little bit more of the story on this one.
So the wedding photographer agreed to shoot a wedding for friends of hers, and throughout the day they just treated her very poorly, and then it all kind of came to a head when it was time to eat, and they informed her that even though she was originally a guest who was seated at a table, that when she agreed to do their wedding photography, that they decided she didn't need to be seated at a table and she didn't need to have food. And when she said, okay, that's fine, but I was working under the impression that I was still going to be eating with my friends at the table that, you guys had slotted me at. So if I'm not doing that, I need to leave and go get food. And the groom told her that she was a wedding photographer and she couldn't leave. And if she left, she wasn't the wedding photographer anymore. And she goes, that's cool. I guess I'm not the wedding photographer. And then proceeded to tell the groom she was going to delete all the photos from the wedding day because she wasn't the wedding photographer anymore. The groom apparently put up no fight to this, so she deleted the photos in front of him and left the wedding. And that story blew up. It was, it wasn't just on like the big photography blogs or big wedding photography blogs. Like that story blew up onto, BuzzFeed and Newsweek and like other huge major like online publications that have nothing to do usually with photography. So it really kind of blew out of proportion as far as that kind of stuff went. And a lot of times when that happens, you see like the person that's, deleting the wedding photos would typically be the villain of the story. But from what I saw online, the majority of people thought of this person as standing up for themselves and their rights as a human being. You should be allowed to take bathroom breaks during a wedding. You should be allowed to drink water. You should be allowed to eat food. Because if you're working for 10, 12 hours, like you need to do those things in order to keep working. And so it's just really nice and heartwarming to see the majority of human beings on this planet Earth, coming together and defending this photographer who decided to leave a wedding and delete the photos after she was treated so poorly. And it warmed my heart to think that so many people out there care about their wedding vendors, specifically their wedding photographers, as I am one myself.
As Stephen mentioned, this story blew up into like numerous news outlets. But where did it start? It started on Reddit in the "Am I the Asshole" subreddit. And the original poster, the photographer asking, like if they were the asshole because they did this, and there was this overwhelming like wave of support for people like, hey, don't say that you're either the photographer or you're not, and make these ultimatums and tell people that they can't leave to eat or do all of these things, and then expect to come away from that unharmed. Should they have deleted the photos? Who knows? Like I have a lot of thoughts on this entire thing. Like, you are seriously underpaying this person. For 8 to 10 hour event, paying them $250 is so nothing. A shoestring budget. That is like, it's so low, so ridiculously low. I mean, the average rate for a wedding photographer in the US for an 8 hour day has been over $2,000 for a while now, like a decade, according to the Knot. And, this person is supposedly your friend and you're treating them like this. I'm not sure that what I would have done at that point, because I know when I started out as a wedding photographer, I was very much trying to please my clients even to my own detriment. But I also started out making $500 a wedding, and that was over 20 years ago. And even now, 2 decades plus into my career as a wedding photographer, clients who are paying me a substantial sum always ask me and my team members if we've had a chance to take a break or to get something to eat. So I don't know what I would do in a situation like that if I was put in it now. I have a feeling I would probably go full Adam Sandler in The Wedding Singer meltdown if this happened to me these days. If I was, had not eaten anything and was just tired and worn out from the day, you as many people on Reddit and this thread responded, play stupid games, win stupid prizes. You want to tell me that I'm either the photographer or not? Bing bong, we're done. Adios. I'm out of here. What about you? What would you have done in this situation? Let me know on social media. Leave us a message. Thanks for listening to this 2021 roundup of the top stories in photography. I'd like to thank all the people who submitted their ideas for this year's top stories. Please be sure to subscribe to the Nerdy Photographer podcast and leave a review on Apple Podcasts, Podchaser, or over on Good Pods. We continue to rank quite highly, often number one in the visual arts podcasts on Good Pods because of listeners like you. You can also follow the podcast at The Nerdy Photo on Instagram, Twitter, and Reddit. New interview and adventure episodes are coming in 2022, so stay tuned. And until next time, stay safe and stay nerdy.
Who's that coming back to town? You better start listening. Who's your heart been beating about? You better listen.